In the sealed, breathless hush of dawn in 1623, a scream tore through the marble bones of Topkapi Palace. It wasn't the cry of a soldier dying on a battlefield or a captive dragged in chains. This was the scream of a 15-year-old girl, Princess Fatma, daughter of the most powerful ruler on earth. Her voice slashed down the corridors like a blade of ice, sharp enough to stop hearts. Even the eunuchs at the doors stepped back, shaken, refusing to interrupt a moment that was never meant to be seen. What happened that night wasn't a private family tragedy. It was a revelation, one that would have been buried if her terror hadn't cracked the silence. It was the hidden price every sultan's daughter eventually paid. A price carved into body and spirit, wiped from official history for 6 centuries. Those screams didn't rise from open wounds. They were the sound of a secret rite, a ritual that shattered the soul long before it ever touched the flesh. A fate that sentenced princesses to shadowed lives before they'd even become women. For more than 500 years, the Ottoman Empire upheld a marriage preparation protocol so cruel that even the fiercest enemies of the throne wouldn't have wished it on their own daughters. The system was scrubbed from chronicles, concealed behind tapestries and gilded walls, and only reconstructed centuries later, because in 2019, sealed documents were uncovered in Istanbul's secret archives. Papers that whispered what the empire had tried to erase. Across the world, millions dreamed of living like Ottoman princesses, draped in silk, heavy with jewels, surrounded by servants who obeyed without question. But behind those shining walls, luxury wasn't the real story. A carefully designed nightmare lived there instead, so refined, so inescapable, that some of these young women chose the quiet mercy of death over the destiny waiting in their marriages. And now, walking this road together, you're going to witness a locked truth, one I found sealed for centuries. So brace yourself. What you're about to hear isn't a fairy tale. It's horror dressed in imperial ceremony. The Ottoman Empire was vast as a shoreless ocean, casting its shadow for centuries. From 1299 to 1922, it bent 3 continents to its will. Its armies thundered from the gates of Vienna to the burning sands of Yemen. In 1453, Constantinople fell, and the city became the beating heart of Ottoman power, renamed Istanbul. Above it rose Topkapi Palace, the empire's most dazzling jewel. Inside those perfumed courtyards and gold-lit halls, the fate of kingdoms and souls was decided. Behind screens and endless corridors, the imperial harem became a world unto itself. At its height, more than 800 women lived there, a sealed universe woven out of silk and surveillance, where every breath was watched, every gesture could bring either favor or ruin. After 1530, when Suleiman the Magnificent granted his wife Harem the title of Haseki Sultan, the harem stopped being just a place of pleasure. It became a stage for intrigue, alliances, and silent wars fought by women. Most concubines were Christian slaves, taken from distant corners of Europe or bought in North African markets. They entered the palace chasing a slim promise of ascent. Their days were filled with music, embroidery, poetry, and rituals of obedience, all meant to catch the Sultan's eye and trade captivity for influence. And strangely, some of these uprooted girls had more pathways to freedom than the daughters born at the very top of the imperial order. The so-called Sultanate of Women, roughly from 1530 to 1656, proved how much power women could wield over the dynasty's course. Figures like Kosum Sultan and Turhan Hatice Sultan steered the state from behind the veil, dictated to the council, declared wars, and wrote brutal, decisive chapters of Ottoman history. But while a few women rose to those heights, princesses of royal blood were trapped in a darker labyrinth. They were diplomatic pieces on the empire's chessboard, human currency used to seal pacts, crush rebellions, and buy the loyalty of dangerous pashas. Into that world, Princess Fatma Sultan was born in 1606. She was the daughter of Sultan Ahmed and Kosim, formidable Kosim, the woman who could rule from the shadows as if she were sovereign herself. Fatma grew up among perfumed gardens and astronomy lessons, among Arabic and Persian manuscripts, surrounded by scholars who praised her mind and chroniclers who admired her beauty. She spoke 4 languages. She practiced Arabic and Persian calligraphy with a poet's grace. She carried an endless hunger for the mysteries of the stars. The palace scholars called her a prodigy, a girl who could debate history, law, and geography with men twice her age. But none of that brilliance could protect her from the fate written beside her cradle. From birth, she belonged to the empire, not to herself. Her future had been decided long before she could even understand the word marriage. She would be given away to strengthen alliances. Her will didn't matter. Her feelings didn't matter. Her life was a guarantee of obedience. So the choice fell on Kara Mustafa Pasha, a battle-hardened commander 20 years her senior, forged in campaigns against Persia. For him, the marriage was a ladder to higher command. For her, it was the opening line of a tragedy. 3 months before the wedding, the palace began a process that chilled the blood. The preparations were called Tarbi al-Mubarat, the sacred education. A ritual reserved only for princesses, unlike anything in other cultures of the time. It wasn't meant to teach her how to live with a husband. It was meant to break her. A polished product of centuries of psychological control, designed to crush the pride of royal blood and reshape it into absolute submission. Overseeing it was Gulnar Hatun, the harem's 60-year-old matron, iron-faced and merciless, a woman who had prepared more than a dozen princesses before Fatma. Under her hard stare, Fatma was led into the Gelin Adası, the bride's chamber, paneled in black wood and layered with Persian carpets, where every detail reminded her of her mission. From dawn until noon, she was forced to practice rituals of humility. She had to master 18 separate forms of bowing, choreographed greetings for service, silence, waiting, and the arrival of her husband. Even her walk was disciplined into obedience. Measured steps, head tilted down at exactly 30 degrees, hands trained never to rise above the heart. Every movement shaved off another fragment of her princely dignity until she became a figure molded for compliance. And then came the cruelest lesson of all: her voice. Her vocabulary was cut down to 34 permitted words. Words for gratitude, acceptance, humble requests, apologies, nothing more. Any attempt to speak freely was punished. Forced fasting, isolation in reflection chambers, or staged humiliation before the women's tribunal led by Kosim herself. Step by step, the girl who once searched the skies for secrets was being remade into something smaller. Not a daughter of the emperor, not a prodigy, just a bride in training, shaped for silence. But Tarbi al-Mubarak didn't end with posture, footwork, or a strangled vocabulary. What followed was meant to break not just Fatma's habits, but her sense of self. Every flicker of disobedience was treated like a disease: a lifted chin, a sigh that came too quickly, a pause before answering. Each one earned punishment. Sometimes it was hunger that lasted until her knees shook. Sometimes it was isolation in damp stone rooms where time blurred. Other times it was worse: being forced to repeat the humility rituals again and again in front of the entire female household, as if she were a stubborn slave instead of imperial blood. Alongside the physical control came what the matrons called mental cleansing. Fatma had to memorize long passages from Ottoman and Persian texts on marital obedience. She would recite them aloud before judges, concubines, and eunuchs who watched her like hawks. Lines from Nasihat al-Muluk of al-Ghazali and excerpts from Akhlaq-i-Nasiri were pressed into her mouth like iron. The words praised submission, self-sacrifice, and wifely obedience as the highest virtues. A girl who once read poems of love and astronomy now had to chant verses designed to dim her will. Her voice, once quick with curiosity, became a tool for her own erasure. Even prayer was turned into a chain. 5 times a day, at fixed, unbending hours, Fatma was required to perform special supplications written by the empire's scholars. These weren't free acts of faith. They had one purpose: to strip the princess of personality and glorify absolute loyalty to her husband. The bowing of prayer was fused with the bowing of marriage duty. The sacred was remade into a mechanism of control. And then came the humiliation that cut deepest. Twice a week, in front of the entire women's house, Fatma was forced to personally serve her father's favored concubines. She washed them, combed their hair, fed them with her own hands, helped dress them for their private meetings with the Sultan. The point was simple and brutal: to crush any remaining pride by making her accept that even the women who shared her father's bed had the right to her service. Witnesses later wrote that more than once Fatma dissolved into helpless sobs, trembling as she adjusted the jewelry on those women's necks, because she understood exactly what the ritual was saying. You are not above this. You belong to this. Pride is a luxury you do not get to keep. A week before the wedding, the regime tightened like a noose. Fatma was moved into the Gelin Köşkü, the bride's pavilion, an isolated structure where no sound from the outside world could reach her. There, every part of her life was controlled with obsessive precision. Her food was restricted to specific items: pomegranate, honey, almonds, goat's milk, spices from Yemen, measured by attendance as if diet itself were a key to obedience. Her baths became daily ceremonies under supervision. Oils of valerian, poppy, and orange blossom were rubbed into her skin. The empire's alchemists, trained in Cordoba and Samarkand, prepared these mixtures with secret additives said to induce calm, pliancy, and sometimes a terrifying sensation of stepping away from oneself. A soft surrender of the mind, even while the body remained awake. The pavilion walls were draped in white linens embroidered with stories of ideal wives from Ottoman and Islamic tradition. Obedient, fertile, yielding women promised heaven for their submission. Wherever suggestion failed, mirrors finished the job. Venetian glass, placed with surgical care, forced Fatma to watch herself endlessly during training. This practice, called muraqaba, once a Sufi meditation, was twisted here into psychological weaponry. She learned to police even her most private